Hello, testing 1 2 1 2. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. C. Please make sure you select English down at the bottom. We will get started for our parents that have joined us in about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Hello, everybody. We'll get started in 1 more minute.
Ms. Berry, you want me to announce the translation?
Yes, let's do that right now.
Yeah.
For our parents that are joining us, if you would please select a language down at the bottom, there's a little globe. It looks like English or Spanish. Take it away, Javier.
Okay, para las personas que necesitan traducción en español, si pueden buscar el globo de su pantalla abajo y háganle un clic ahí y le va a salir español o inglés. Seleccionen el idioma que gusten, ¿ok? Gracias.
Thank you so much, Javier.
No
And I'd like to welcome everybody to our second installment that Mrs. Berry is leading, our professional development for our families. The first one, if you joined us last week, it was on writing and the stages of writing for kinder, first, second, and third grade. And we thank Mrs. Berry so much for leading us through that. So much great information. Tonight's presentation will be on reading, the stages of reading, and understanding how our kids progress developmentally from kindergarten all the way to 5th grade, and those reading stages. So I want to thank Mrs. Berry for presenting and sharing her knowledge. We are so thankful and grateful. And I'm going to turn it over. Oh, before I do that, I'd also like to thank our translations unit for coming on and providing the translation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And at the end of the presentation, Mr. Caballero, who's also on, thank you for joining us, Mr. Caballero. He will be monitoring the chat and we'll be able to have a Q&A session afterwards. So thank you so much to everybody who is on. And thank you again to Mrs. Berry. And now I introduce to you, Mrs. Berry. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on. My Zoom meeting is not responding. Give it just a second and I'll spotlight myself. Here we go. All righty. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy Monday evening. If you joined us last week or you watched my recording that I posted on the Facebook group or have seen it on the school website, the About Me is basically the same, just in case we have some new faces of people who are joining us this time who didn't get a chance last time. So this is all about reading, and it's kindergarten through 5th grade and just the developmental stages that we see and how you can help at home. So like I said, a little bit about me. I am Mrs. Berry, previously Miss Hobbs. I got married this summer, so my name is different. And I'm 27 and I'm a kindergarten teacher here at Chatsworth Park. I have an obsession with all things Disney. A little bit about my education. I received a Bachelor of Science in Early Childhood Education in 2016 from College of Charleston, which is in South Carolina, which is where I'm from. In South Carolina, we had to specialize in specific grade spans for our certification, and I specialized in early childhood, which is pre-K through 3rd grade. So I currently hold 2 certificates, the California Teaching Credential, which is pre-K through 12, and the South Carolina certificate, which is pre-K through 3rd. My experience, this is currently my 5th year teaching. I've taught in a variety of school areas from rural South Carolina to downtown Los Angeles to here in beautiful Chatsworth. And I've taught all grades pre-K through 2nd within those 5 years. So let's get started with the presentation. A little Disney for you. Disclaimer, we will not be focusing on what any particular stage is equivalent to by grade level, because all kids learn at different speeds, just like learning to walk. However, we will be focusing on the different stages of learning to read. We will also focus on how you can determine their level at home, and therefore how to best help them proceed in being the best reader they can be. We aim for growth and progress. Disclaimer part 2, I talk fast if you haven't noticed. Once again, sorry in advance. I have a chunk of information to get through. This is being recorded in case you missed this or need to go back and revisit anything. Feel free to take a picture of your computer slide if you feel you need this information immediately, and you can't wait a couple of days for the video. That is completely okay. And if you're here, then you believe this as well. I truly believe this, especially now with virtual school, that it takes 3 of us to get the most growth and progress. It takes the teacher, the family, and the students to all be working together cohesively to get the most growth and progress for their education. So thank you for joining. A lot of it is a kudos to you guys as well. So the first stage is called the pre-A reader. So what this looks like, how do I know if my child is a pre-A reader? Pre-A readers know fewer than 40 upper and lowercase letters out of the 52 combined, so 26 upper, 26 lower. They're usually unable, excuse me, I just ate dinner, my tongue's all twisted, usually unable to track print from left to right. They kind of jump around the page. They usually don't know the difference between a letter and a word, and they sometimes need help writing their name and recognizing letters in their name. So if those descriptions fit what you see at home, then how can you help them? Practice letter names and sounds, letter formations, lots of tracing, work on hearing rhymes, syllables, and initial consonant sounds. And then with books, talk about oral language and concepts of print. And I'm going to go more into depth on what exact activities you can do with each of these things. So what does helping look like? For letters and sounds, they can make a puzzle out of their name, rainbow writing, which is where you have a word written down or a letter, and they trace over it in red, and then in orange, and then in yellow, and all the colors of the rainbow they just trace on top, and they either say the word or the letter every time they trace it. Magnetic letters, so you can build words. You can play matching, uppercase and lowercase. Name a word or find the letter that, go fish. So lots of different games that you can play with, like cards with letters on them. Play a word hunt, tracing. Using your pointer finger, which in my class I refer to as their reading finger, and trace each letter, saying the name of the letter each time. Point to a picture that names the picture. So if it was apple, I would say A, apple, A. And then that's how I would trace it. And it will build that fluency and a little bit of the motor movement, the fine motor in your hand, and it helps them retain some of that information. And start with letters in their name, and then add on letters that the teacher has taught in class. For rhymes, syllables, and initial sounds, you can do thumbs up, thumbs down, which is something I do with rhyming. Say two words. Do they rhyme? Do they not rhyme? Clapping syllables. So syllables. So just clapping words apart. Pulling out initial sounds. So like for the word sound, the initial consonant is in sound. Just pulling that first sound out. Taking pictures that you find and sorting them by letters or sounds or rhyming and not rhyming. You can use a dry erase board, pictures, paper. You can have them draw to sort pictures. With books, picture walks, which is just talking about what they see in the picture. So as they flip through the book, you do a picture walk and you're like, what do you notice here? Tell me about it. What do you notice in this picture? And you just talk about it. You can act out a story. So that's really building their oral language that they'll then start to notice once they move up some of those words in the sentences in those books. And then shared reading. So you can either do choral reading where you guys read it at the same time, or you can read and then they can repeat what you said. But at least getting in that information where they're reading a book, not necessarily on their own, but the act of reading a book is really important. Finding words or letters. So if you're reading a sentence, ask them to find the letter A in a word, or find the word the if you're finding a sight word. Point to the first letter or last letter, uppercase, punctuation, kind of getting those concepts of print. So even though they're not necessarily reading those sentences, they are still dealing with books and dealing with concepts of print, and that will be ingrained with them so they don't have to learn that at the same time that they're actually reading. So if they're here, practice all above strategies, just one per area per night, no more than 20 minutes total. I wouldn't spend more than 20 minutes on it because they'll get really frustrated. How do I know if they're ready to move from pre-A to emergent, which is the next stage? They can write their first name without a model. They can identify 40 upper and lowercase letters out of the 52. They can demonstrate left to right directionality. So even if you're reading and they're following along, they can follow along left to right. They can hear and recognize at least 8 letter sounds, and they can follow simple directions, which are 1 or 2 step directions. Like open the book, find the first word. That would be 2 directions. The next stage is emergent reader. And yes, all the pictures you'll see today are from classes that I've previously had doing fun reading activities. So how do I know if my child is an emergent reader? They know all their letters and the sounds. They can do one-to-one matching. So I point to every word that I read individually, not just sliding my finger across. They can control left to right more than one line. So it might have 2 lines, like the end of the sentence might go to a second line of print. They're starting to use reading strategies like using pictures for meaning. So like if it's a picture of a frog and it starts with the initial letter F and they don't know how to necessarily sound out frog, they can use meaning to determine the word. They're writing their letters correctly, most of them, you know. They can hear and write consonant, vowel, consonant sounds in sequence. So like the word cat, they can go k-at, cat, and then they can write k-at in the same order they said it. They can write it, which means they'll be able to read it in that order as well. They can monitor for their own meaning. They'll be like, wait, that didn't make sense, what I just read. So they'll reread to correct some of their errors. They can read and write about 30 sight words, and they can talk about a story if you ask them questions, and then write a simple message with help, like a sentence about the story. So how can you help them as an emergent reader? Reviewing sight words, word studying, read and reread books with prompting and help, discuss books together, and engage in guided writing. So practice reading and talking about words for about 20 minutes because the reading portion may only take 5 minutes. but the other parts can fill that 20 minutes. So what does helping look like? Sight word review. Choose 3 of their sight words or vocabulary words for them to write. 2 should be ones that they already know, and 1 should be a new one. So that way they're taking the same concept of repeating words that they do know and adding it to the one that they don't know. It'll make it easier to learn the one that they don't know. So this is where you can make sure that they're forming their letters and the spelling of those words are correct. Play flashcard games, build words with Play-Doh or Legos or magnets. You can find these words in books and keep tally. Play Go Fish. Take little cards, index cards, have them write it, and you guys can make games. You can play hopscotch outside. Jellyfish hop, you put it down, you say the word, spell the word, and hop over it like a jellyfish hopping around in the ocean. Word on a plate is a little song. You write each of the words on a plate and you say, if, let's see, go. If go is on the plate, pick it up. If go is on the plate, pick it up. If go is on the plate, then you better not be late. If go is on the plate, pick it up. And so then they have to find that word and pick it up before the song is over. You can do that with any word and any plate, you know. So word study, initial sounds, final sounds, CVC, and stretching. So initial sounds, like if you're talking about a word you might see in the story. Let's go with frog. It's a good example. First sound, that's that pulling out. So working on the first sound. The last sound, frog, g, 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 pinching that last sound. Or CVC sounds like cat, k, at, cat. Or just stretching them really slow, so they're starting to hear all of that. You can do that by picture sorting, changing sounds in words. If I want to change the word can to cat, which sound am I changing? The first, the middle, or the last? Mop to map. Which sound am I changing? The first, the middle, or the last? So they're able to manipulate sounds in 3-letter words. They can have them make words on a whiteboard like cat and then change it to say bat. And if they're still struggling with this, try putting each sound in its own box. This is called an Elkonin box. You can just draw it on a piece of paper and then use physical objects to represent each sound, like a toy or a Lego or a doll, whatever. Doesn't matter. They push the object into the box when they say the sound, and you would write the letter in the box. And then you would then again pull it out and then push them together to finish, to read the sounds together. So like, at, and then do it backwards, at, and then push them together, cat. But you're using physical objects if using just your finger isn't quite clicking. Read and reread with prompting. Encourage your kid to read on their own for the first 5 to 8 minutes, even if they have to read the short story twice. Then have them read it to you after that time frame, and you monitor for their mistakes. Make sure they're pointing at words so they aren't memorizing the story, and help problem solve with words they don't know. So looking at pictures, use a word that makes sense, or skip it, come back to it. Think of the beginning sound, look for chunks of sounds. So sometimes we're learning like ch, that's a chunk of sound, or ing, ing, that's a chunk of sounds. Read the whole word, including the ending. Ask, how do you know it says cat and not cap? So when you're talking about reading the book, when they read it back to you after they've read it to themselves a couple times. Then talk about the book. And so if it's a fiction book, have them retell the story, make connections, ask and answer questions. That can be like, how many pets did the princess have on, you know, at the beginning? And they can go back in the story. Let them use the story to answer the questions, because that way they're able to find the answers in the text, which is a super important skill. Identify character, setting, problem, and solution. For informational or nonfiction stories, ask and answer questions, identify the main topic, recall key details, making connections, and compare and contrast concepts. Connections refers to like, oh, they went on a bike ride in the story. Have you ever gone on a bike ride? Or did you read another story about a bike ride? So you're connecting what you read in the story to something personal that you've either done, that you've read, or that you've heard about. A little bit more. Sorry, I'm trying to talk fast to get through it. What does helping look like? Engage in guided writing, which is assisted, not independent writing, for a personal use and book understanding, not for a writing assignment. When you have writing assignments, that's done independently. But guided writing is where you're helping them to help them understand a book. Write a sentence about the story you read. Working on printing left to right, top to bottom, writing unknown words quickly, sounding out unknown words, using spaces, and using similar sentence structure in a story. So if the story says, I like the milk, I like the cat, I like the mailman, so your sentence might say, I like the, and something that they like, matching the sentence structure. They usually start from 3 to 5 words at the beginning of the stage and will end around 7 to 10 words per sentence. Other strategies, if you see that they're struggling with writing, have them tell you what they want to say, and then you can write a line for each word they say, and then they can put 1 word per line. And writing and reading back the sentence to you with prompting as well. Use alphabet charts and sight words to help you write these. Look, copy. This is heavily helped for this part to write about the story. So going from the emergent to an early reader, they can read and write about 30 to 50 sight words. They can retell the story. They can apply phonetic principles, which is like the sound chunks, like A says ah, or, oh, I know that says cap, not cat, because I see the T at the end, not a P. So that's applying a phonetic principle. They start to add in expression into stories that they can read early. So instead of saying, I like the cat, they're like, I like the cat. So it's a little bit more expressive. They're using at least 2 different strategies to solve new words about 80% of the time for a grade level specific reading. So that would be like looking at the picture and looking at the first sound. That's 2 strategies. They reread to get meaning. They can hear and record CVC words, which is like cat, pig, dog. Complete the 5-finger test for grade level appropriate text, which we'll get to in a second. And they can have conversation about books that they've read and tell an opinion with the word because. Like, I like that book because, or I did not like it because. So terms to know before moving forward with the next couple of stages: comprehension, accuracy, and fluency. Comprehension is the understanding of a story. This is why discussions after reading are super important. They must be able to answer questions about a story to continue to move through the stages. Once again, these are the same things, discuss and read books together, that I mentioned earlier, some ways to talk about stories. What is accuracy? Here's where the 5-finger rule jumps in. Accuracy is similar to the 5-finger rule that we learned as kids when picking out library books. We want kids reading words and stories with strategies of at least 95% accuracy. And the 5-finger rule is a good judge of that. So pick up a book, you know, a grade level book that they're reading, and for every word that they miss on any page, hold up a finger every time there's a word you don't know. So if I don't know one of the words or 0, that book is too easy. If I miss 2 to 3 words on that page, it's just right. 4, I can try it. I might need some help, but I can try it. And if I miss more than 5 words on that page, that book is too hard for me to read accurately by myself. So I would pick an easier book. Fluency is the expression in which the child is reading. If they pause after every word, the text is too hard for them. If they're pausing and robotic reading after every 2 to 3 words, it's still a bit too hard, like that. Just right sounds like they're having a conversation. Questionative, excitement, fluid with 4 to 7 words before you take a breath. Running through with no expression like erase and ask them to reread it. So if you go way too fast, because they might have memorized it. So ask them to reread it with expression first to see if they memorized it. If they still know it and it's still going well, then the book is still too easy. If you ask them to reread it with expression and it's a little bit harder, then it's probably just right and they just happen to memorize it. So the early reader, which is our next stage. This is one of my favorite pictures. This was from my first year of teaching ever. And I had this group of girls who love to have story time and read to their stuffed animals every day. That was their favorite thing. How do I know if my child is an early reader? They can read and write sight words that appear frequently in their reading, which is about 40 to 60 words. If you're familiar with the rainbow words from kindergarten, we learn about 60 words by the end. The rainbow words, there's 6 colors and there's 10 words each. So that's about 60 words if you're looking for an estimate. They can use one-to-one matching, pictures, left to right, directionality, with like second nature. You don't have to remind them, it looks fluid and easy. They can apply phonetic principles, read with expression, and they're starting to gain fluency. They can complete the 5-finger test to figure out which books they can read. They have conversations about books and answer multiple questions, like connecting to the text, themselves or the world, retelling, inferencing is a new one in this stage, which we'll get to in a second. How do I help my child as an early reader? Sight words and word study, reading with prompting and problem solving, discussing and writing. Practice reading and talking about words for at least 20 minutes a night. The reading portion may only take up to 5 minutes, and the rest will fill their 20 minutes. So what does helping look like here? Sight words, same idea as the previous level, but you're using different words. So same strategies as before. Word study, any words you choose for these activities should come from the story they read. So if you're reading about the princess and the pea, maybe one of the words you want to study is princess and pea. So those are words you're studying. You can sort pictures by sounds, make words, and use the Elkonin boxes, the same strategies as before. So I might sort the pictures by the first sound or their last sound or how many syllables they have, just to get familiar with the structure of the words. So I'm studying the words. Larger sound chunks start to appear. So instead of sorting things by the sound like versus like a single sound at the beginning, you can start sorting words based on digraphs like ch and like or like double O at the beginning versus the end of the word. So like if I'm sorting CH versus beginning and end, so I might sort like chart and like beach, so beginning and end. At this stage, they start to notice sound chunks. There are a bunch down there that you can see. Those are all different chunks of sounds because these are 2 letters that make a new sound that is not the original alphabetical sound that they learn, like A says A, you know, because AI says A. So this is where they start to notice the new sound chunks. In the middle of the stage, so beginning it's sound chunks, then they start to go into blending 2 and 3 letters, like blended consonants, like T and R say tur versus some kids will think it says like CH and train, but recognizing the blended sound, FL, and then like scrap. It makes one sound, makes one sound, but it's 3 letters blended together. And then at the end of the stage, they're starting to tackle things like silent E and complex vowels. So like EIGH says A, so it makes a complex vowel sound. So they're starting to notice those things by the end of this stage in their reading and writing. Reading with prompting and problem solving, so they're monitoring their word problem solving using the meaning, like what did I say? Did it make sense? Visual, they're looking at the sounds in the words. And structural, you know, in the sentence, does it make sense to have like, so like I see 3 pig, it would be pigs. That would be more of a structural reading. So yeah, and that's what those are. Discussion and writing, talk about every single story after you read it. Then they can start writing down an answer to one of the questions you ask. Review their writing and edit and help them fix their mistakes. Again, this is where you're doing a lot of the editing and the fixing and talking about their writing. A lot of how do you know? Why do you think? Do you agree with? What in the book makes you think that? So just getting them to talk and discuss about any of the stories. Here's a lot of word solving techniques. So eagle eye, looking at the picture. Lips the fish, say the first sound. Stretchy snake, say it slow and get all the sounds. Ship, ship. Chunky monkey, so if they know like at, this is where word study comes in. Like words that rhyme, at, flat, splat, if they know at, they know that chunk, then they can apply it to multiple words. Trying lion, try to reread it and think what would make sense here. Skippy the frog, skip the word and then come back and put something in that might make sense. So if it's a story about a frog and it says the, I don't know, jumped in the water. And I go back and I'm like, oh, frog, the frog jumped in the water, because they see the first sound. So skipping sometimes helps. Flippy the dolphin, this is where the vowels come in. The magic E, silent E at the end will flip that vowel change. So like mad to made, it changes the A to A from short to long. So changing the vowel sound. And then careful caterpillar, thinking about all the parts of the word, including the endings, and reading it carefully so you don't miss, like splatter might say splitter. But if you carefully look at all the letters, you wouldn't, those might fix their mistake. How do I know? So we have 2 more stages, transitional and fluent. I know. Okay, so how do I know if they're ready to move from, where are we? Early to transitional. They can read and write 80+ sight words with ease. They can monitor themselves for how they are solving the words with variety of strategies, which these are the different strategies of word solving. So they're using multiple strategies to figure out words. Applying phonic elements like digraphs and blends into their reading and writing, and starting to understand what silent E and those vowel combinations, because that's right here at the end of the stage. They reread a text to try and understand what it means. So if they're like, I don't know what that meant, we'll go back and read it and try and understand it. They can read easier books with good fluency. So if they're struggling, say like if it's a 5-finger text and they're at like a 4 and they're going through it, their fluency isn't going to be fantastic because they're solving a lot of words. But if they're at like a 1 or a 2 through the text, their fluency should be much better because they aren't spending as much time solving words, that they can use their expression more when they're reading. And they can easily retell the main idea with key details that support what the story is about. And how do I know? Because these things happened in the story. The transitional reader, here's where we put on a play about the day the crayons quit. Reader's theater is something we're going to talk about in this section. There's another picture of me from my first year. How do I know if they're a transitional reader? They're pretty diverse in their needs. They can automatically recognize an increasing number of sight words or vocabulary words, but they'll often struggle with sophisticated vocabulary, like sophisticated or multi-syllabic words, complex vowel patterns and endings. So that's kind of where the struggle is, but they know a lot with the sight words and the basic vocabulary. They're most likely to excel in either fluency, decoding, which is figuring out the words, or retelling, but they'll usually struggle in the other two. They're starting to monitor with, word solving and variety of strategies. That means they're able to realize it themselves and figure out how they can solve words. They're applying their phonetic elements, digraphs, and blending. They're rereading text to get meaning, reading familiar text with fluency, good fluency, and retelling the story, which is what you notice at the end of the last one. How can I help them as a transitional reader? Word study, comprehension, and fluency. If you notice, we're not doing so much like sounds and like oral language as much and letters anymore. We're talking more about studying words and parts of words, and comprehension, which is talking about stories, and rereading to make it sound like we're talking. This is where we've moved to. So what does helping look like? Word study. Determine their word knowledge inventory. Here is a good spot where if you think your child might be in this area, to take a picture of this page, because these are words that you can have them spell. So have them spell on their own the following words, which include short vowels, digraphs, all different types of words. So this is a list. And basically where you see them struggling, so like if they struggle with the word plump, figure out what part they're struggling with. Is it the blend, PL, at the beginning? Is it that glued sound, Is it that chunk? Or did they recognize it from jump? And so you would know if it's just the blend or the sound glued together. So you can figure out like thorn has TH and OR as two different sound chunks. So based on how they spell the words will determine what type of similar words you can do to do word study. So that would just be words that are very similar with the same spelling patterns as the words in the word study. You can sort with pictures. You can have them make words, change sounds like plump to jump. So they pull out the J and add PL. So they're changing sounds. The sound boxes and like analogy charts. Like what's the difference between like skunk and skunks, and analyze the two words. Comprehension. After they read a story or passage, tell your child to say, tell me about what you read. And this is where they retell the story. You can prompt them to like, tell me more, or what else do you remember? And then after they've retold the story to you, have a deeper conversation. Talk about the main idea. Have them recall some details. Inferencing, which is getting a lot bigger. This is where a lot of questions and like writing prompts come from, is why do you think blank happened? And then where the answer isn't said in the text, you have to infer. You have to take what you said, excuse my computer, and think of, well, what does that mean? And the answer isn't specifically spelled out in the text. And then, because you have text-dependent questions where I'm like, I go back and I find the answer. How many steps did it take to get from the front door to wherever, or where is the setting? And it specifically says like on the farm. So that would be a text-dependent question. And then connecting the story to something else they've read. And this is important here. In this stage, they're writing their answers. So I would ask the kid questions and they would write their answers, and then they're going to read them to me. And that will prompt our discussion about the story after. So I'd ask maybe 1 or 2 questions, 3, depending on their day, and then go from there. Let them write aloud and then come to me after. Fluency. Here's where reader theater comes in. Choose a fiction text. So like Three Little Pigs, like a made up story, not an informational story. At like the easier stage, like a 1 or a 0, or a book they read maybe last year. There we go. That has interesting dialogue. So like readers theater plays, you can Google them, See if something comes up, ask your child's teacher if they have something. And you can act out their stories and use some of the text they're reading, oh, I misspelled there, as their dialogue. They should be able to read the text with little issues with word solving, so this way they can focus on how they're talking. And like plays are a really good way to get that expression out. Listening to books on tape or listening to you reading to them is a good way for them to hear the expression and inflection in the words as well. And how do I know if they're ready to go from transitional to fluent? Fluent is our last stage. They can monitor their mistakes when they don't understand the text. They can decode multi-syllable words with little support. So they could like decode the word support, you know, support, which I would take the first chunk. Oh, there we go. The first chunk like sup, and I would sound that out, and then port, and sound that out and put it together for decoding multi-syllable words. They can read with fluency, phrasing, and expression, and they can retell a story by referring to things and examples that happened in the text they read. The fluent reader. One thing I miss about being home is my dad would always come on Halloween and read The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown to my kids. So that's something that I do miss, not being near where my parents are. Look at how supportive he is. How do I know if my child is a fluent reader? They have a sizable core of words and they rarely make mistakes when reading words. And if they do, they self-correct quickly. They have automaticity with word recognition. So if it's a new word, they can recognize it very quickly. And they've developed efficient and flexible word solving strategies. So they're like, ooh, that strategy doesn't work. And they solve it and it goes pretty fast and it's very effective. So what they need to focus on is monitoring for comprehension and the comprehension aspect. And they're writing short responses about their thinking. And teachers usually use those responses as well as their discussion to assess if the child understands what they read. So how do I help if they are a fluent reader? Comprehension, comprehension, comprehension. Strategies. So what you're working on are the comprehension strategies versus the skills. And this is a good picture, you know, if your child is in this one, to take a picture of this as well, using schema, predicting, inferring. So working on that strategy to helping them understand the text, which is a lot of just talking and practicing and lots of reading and helping them explain, well, what do you see when the author describes the pumpkin patch as brown ghosts of falls past? What does that mean? What does that look like to you? And talking about visualizing. So you're talking about the strategy that helps them understand, oh, he's talking about the plants are dead. Right, so you have the strategy to get to the comprehension where they can then tell you the skill of what they're trying to answer question-wise. So those strategies are what you're working on. So what does helping look like? Let them read, and then have a variety of 5 to 7 questions for them to answer by writing. Once they write their answers, you have them read to you what they wrote, and then you can talk about the story. So the types of questions vary slightly between fictional and non-fictional, also known as narrative and informational. The next 2 slides have ideas. Remember, you can take pictures or you can watch this again later. So these are 5 to 7 questions would be about, excuse me, oh my goodness, 1 question per category. I wouldn't ask more than 1. So for fictional stories, asking questions. What are you wondering? What confused you? Text-dependent questions, which they can find the answer in the text. Summarizing the main idea. What is this part mostly about? Tell me in 1 to 2 sentences what you read. What are the most important events? Analyzing characters. Describe them. Did they change? How did they change? How are blank and blank similar? How are they different? Why do you think the character says link? Understanding vocabulary through context clues. What do you think this word means? What clues helped you figure out that meaning? Inferencing, what did the author mean by blank? What were you thinking when the text said blank? What motivated the character to blank? What were you thinking about the character? Evaluating the story. What lesson did they teach? What theme? What was the author's message? Why did the author write this? Is this a good title? Why or why not? And then text dependent, always try to find evidence from the text to support answers. So even if it's inferencing, like what motivated the character to try on a new hat? Say that's my question. I was like, well, because the other hat was too small. And then I go to the text and I'll be like, this hat didn't fit. And then that would be what I was talking about and where I read it and why that made them think they tried on a new hat, using the text for my answers. So then these are nonfiction and informational questions. They're pretty similar, but they're just a little bit different towards the end of it. So asking questions again, what questions do you have? What questions are answered in this paragraph? Text-dependent questions. Identify the central and main idea. What is this part mostly about? What text feature help you determine the main idea? So here's where text features really come in, like heading, photo, table of context, index, glossary, the things that we find in informational text. Summarize what you wrote, what you read in 1 to 2 sentences by writing. Understanding vocabulary, define challenging words. Analyzing relationships, so instead of characters, you're analyzing relationships between things. How are they the same? How are they different? What are the effects? What is the author comparing? Inferencing, same type of idea. What made you think that? What were you thinking when the text said? Evaluating, why did they write this? How do you think the author feels? Usually in informational, you'll find that the author tends to have an opinion about what they're writing about. Like maybe I'm writing about penguins and my opinion is that penguins are cute. And you might find evidence that I think they're cute by something that I read, and you won't see me talking about things that penguins do that might be gross. And that would be, their opinion is that they're cute because this is what the author said. What facts do they give to support their view? And then understanding text features. Why did they include text features like maps and pictures, table of contents, heading, glossary, all of those. Describing text features, text structure, excuse me. So the overall structure, which is how the story is laid out. Ooh, that's supposed to say does, not dies. Does the author use sequential, storytelling, descriptive storytelling? Or is it a comparison? Are they using cause and effect or like problem and solution? Give an example, and then text dependent again, try and find evidence from the text to support your answers. I know this feels like a lot. I wanted to make sure we could try and get in some questions before an hour was up. But remember, read, read, read. The biggest part of being a good reader is that they love to read. Reading will be a struggle for your child if they hate it, if they don't like it. Make reading fun. For example, one of my years of teaching in South Carolina, I had this desk, and on Fridays, we had flashlight Fridays, and they got to take flashlights, and their favorite spot to read, I would turn the lights off, and they would read with flashlights. The most coveted spot was under my desk. But it was fun. They wanted to read. Didn't matter what they were reading, they loved doing it. And as long as a kid has a book in their hand, they're going to love reading, and that's going to make them a better reader, the more reading that they do. So, thank you. I am going to take some questions if Mr. C has any questions that he found for me there.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much, Ms. Berry. This was a